Research that provides solutions to the challenges that Los Angeles and California and the country face, and in particular in the area of environmental sustainability. And we'll hear more about that area today. And one of the goals of tonight's event, this is our first event that reaches out to graduate and undergraduate students here at UCLA. We've had a couple of symposium, we've held our board meetings, and now we'd like to introduce ourselves to the student body, and this is our coming out event. Before I introduce our panelists, though, I'd like to just take a minute and recognize two people that have made the center and this event tonight possible, and that is Meyer and Rennie Luskin, who are up front. Would you guys... We're very grateful to them for their support, and also to Meyer especially for his guidance as we've developed the center over time. Okay, one of the goals of the Luskin Center is to identify the issues that are most important, most critical to Los Angeles and to California. And so I thought what I would do is identify young leaders in the environmental area in Los Angeles, many of whom don't think of themselves as leaders because they work for elected leaders or public administrators. Some of them actually are executive directors, but I can assure you they will all be leaders, if not today, in the near future. What I'd like us to do tonight is start by having each of our panelists, I'll go through the panel, and introduce them, but I'm going to ask them first to talk a little bit about their career trajectories. There's a remarkable number here who are actually UCLA alums. That's no accident. And they can describe how they got through their UCLA experience to their current positions. And then we're going to go through a second round and have a more kind of dynamic discussion from each of their own perspectives, what they think are the most important environmental and sustainability issues that Los Angeles needs to tackle today. And we have, by design, identified people from the private sector, the public sector, and the nonprofit sector. So we're going to get a wide range of perspectives. Okay, so without further ado, let me start, and I'm going to be a little brief on the introductions because I'm hoping that it's okay, Emily. That's a good opportunity. Why don't we all do that so your bosses don't call you?
It's very rude to have your cell phone on. You should definitely turn it off.
All right. So Daniel Freedman, to my immediate left, is the founding executive board member and chair of the Los Angeles Sustainability Collaborative, and a former student of mine, I might add. He's also the principal of Strategy Green, a business consulting firm. To his left is a woman I'm very pleased and honored to have gotten to know over the last year, Michelle Garakian, who's Vice President of Policy and Programs for the Los Angeles Business Council. And Michelle and I have worked together on the research behind solar policies for Los Angeles. To her left is Ms. Emily Kane, who is the Legislative Deputy for Council Member Paul Koretz, a lawyer by training and a UCLA alum. To her left is Alex Fade, an associate of Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa's Office for Economic and Business Policy, and he's the Clean Tech Liaison, which is how most of us know him here at UCLA. And last but not least, we have our nonprofit representative, Damon Nagami, who's a staff attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council. Okay, since you're all going to say a little bit about yourselves and how you got here, I won't go any further. I think I'll start with Dan, and let me just ask each of you if you could just describe your career trajectories and identify what has most surprised you about your current position. And I think, yeah, you got it.
I go. Hello? All right. I guess I'll do this sitting then. So career trajectory. I did my undergrad at Berkeley doing environmental policy. This was in 2000 to 2004, when people still didn't believe climate change was a real existing problem. To say the least, it was, I'll try and be a little brief, but to say the least, it was a challenge, and there wasn't a lot of support out there. So I just want to applaud again the Luskins for doing this. But then I came to UCLA, where I got my master's. That's where Professor DeShazo taught me. Eventually, I ended up being successful, particularly on green buildings. I ended up getting LEED accredited. Immediately started getting involved in a lot of green building projects here in the region. I just finished up a fantastic project out in Panorama City. It's one of the largest green, gold-rated industrial facilities in the country. But most of my emphasis has been going towards communications and public affairs, where I've been working with a lot of government, business, and nonprofit entities on basically doing a lot of communications, public affairs, and government affairs issues. So anything having to do with environmental issues and the government, we tend to get involved. Any surprises? Lots of surprises. But what I will tell you is the biggest surprise is, one, how many people are getting involved in these issues. And there's good surprises and there's bad surprises. The good surprise is how people are willing to commit themselves into it, and the bad surprises are the people who are willing to sell themselves out into it. And the companies and the government officials and even the nonprofits who are getting involved and aren't interested in the issues and the actual conclusion at all, but more interested in benefiting from the process. So, sorry to end on a negative note, but thanks, Dan.
Yeah. I'm Michelle. Sorry. I am also a UCLA alumni. I did my undergrad here, graduated in 2006. It took a little time, but I did it. My trajectory was not actually in green or environment or anything. I was actually working towards a degree in Middle Eastern Studies and International Development. But during my time at UCLA, I interned with Mayor James Kane for 2 years in his Office of Economic Development. And that kind of renewed or kind of incited this love for public policy at the local level. So when I came back from living in Cairo, I contacted an old friend there, and I was linked up with Mary Leslie at the LA Business Council. That was 5 years ago. I started as a assistant program consultant, and I have now made it to vice president. So that is the biggest shock, actually, and surprise. But as far as career trajectory, I'm very, very proud to be where I am today. I'm very, very proud to work in the Los Angeles Business Council. I'm very fortunate to have a mentor in my boss, Mary Leslie, who's been working in this field for many, many years. And I'm proud to be part of a business organization that isn't one of the examples that Dan was speaking about. We actually put business into practice, and we have been working in environmental issues since 2007 with the session of the Green Building Ordinance in Los Angeles, and then with Alex on Clean Tech LA, and now we're working with JR in UCLA Luskin Center on the creation of a feed-in tariff, indigenous feed-in tariff here, which I'll explain more later, and its implementation in the city. So that's where I am, and surprises, I don't know, there hasn't really been any surprises. I've worked really hard, and
I don't believe
yeah. I'm just saying, I mean, it's really, really great, you know. I mean, if you work really hard and you stay with something and you're dedicated, I think you'll get to where you want to be. So.
Surprising or you get solar on all the roofs in LA?
I don't think it's surprising.
All right.
Surprising.
We'll talk more about that later.
I'm excited. My name is Emily. I grew up in the Bay Area to a total hippie mom, so I was an environmentalist in the womb, I think. And when I came to UCLA and took a major in Jewish studies and a minor in public policy, I knew that I wanted to do something with social justice. I didn't know what that was going to look like. And when I graduated in 2004, I was deciding between going to rabbinical school or going to law school. And so, right? And so I took a job in Washington, D.C. in the Jewish world, but doing progressive domestic public policy. And it became very clear to me right away that I had the temperament of a lawyer and not the temperament of a rabbi. And so that is the route that I took. And in all seriousness, the people who I admired and the jobs, the people who I said, I would love to do what that person is doing one day, they were all attorneys. And so I rooted out a good, progressive, kind of hipster law school, and that was in Tucson, Arizona, at the University of Arizona. And I got this great progressive education in a very red state, fantastic environmental policy people, fantastic immigration people, fantastic civil rights people, and I learned a lot. And I also learned that I wanted to be doing the work that I was so excited and had cut my teeth doing back home in California, and specifically in Los Angeles. And so when graduation happened last May, I knew that I had to take the bar and I had to get a job. And I worked my contacts, and Councilmember Koretz had just been elected, and I had the opportunity to interview with him, spoke with him about how much I love Los Angeles, how much I love this part of Los Angeles. He represents from the 405 all the way to La Brea, the south part of the valley, down past Pico. And being a good Bruin, I thought this was the perfect place to start my LA political career and work on environmental policy in addition to a whole host of other things, and I'm very happy to be here.
So I had no idea I was going to be working in politics or environment until a few years ago. When I was in college, I thought I was going to go into business or law school. I was a history undergrad, and what do you do with a history degree? Like, you beat your friends at Jeopardy and go to law school. So I was like, well, I don't know what this is going to do. I thought I was going to go to business school. I had started a business when I was in high school. It was, apropos of nothing, a teen dance club. It actually turned out to be really relevant, because when you got to deal with kids fighting and all that stuff, it makes dealing with elected officials that much easier. So fast forward through college, I was in a seminar, Fiat Lux seminar. They still have those?
Yeah, they still have them.
I took like 20 Fiat Lux seminars. They're mostly for freshmen, right? But I was always like the older guy.
Those were easy credits, right?
Yeah. That's not why. And so Michael Dukakis comes into one of my classes and he says, don't go to law school unless you want to be an attorney. And I, it's like, well, I'll try this public policy thing. And then I took a class with Professor Kleiman, and Professor DeShazo stepped in one day, and I was like, oh, this stuff's so cool. And so then through that, I did an internship with City Councilman Bill Rosenthal's office. It was very fortunate timing that right when I was about to graduate from college, my mentor was leaving to go be an attorney, because he had this law degree and he was getting paid like a third of what he was worth working in government, and he'd kind of gotten over that. So he left, and they said, well, Alex, do you want to just take Phil's spot? And I was like, yeah, of course. So here I was like straight out of college and working with people who have master's degrees and have been there for a lot longer. So internships can turn out to be very valuable. So that's lesson number one. I guess I was with Mr. Rosenthal's office for about 2.5 years on staff, and then I covered all the city council meetings, which is everything from the airport to the zoo and police to environment, and specialized on environmental issues, which in that district was a lot of wetlands conservation. It's a very progressive district, just like the 5th district, so a lot of people that are really interested in global warming and energy conservation as well. And parlayed that into a move into the mayor's office, where I am now, working on clean technology issues and helping to develop businesses in the clean technology sector, so that it's kind of somewhere between jobs and environment, which I think is a really, really good spot to be in. So, I left out, I did the CAP UCDC program when I was at UCLA, and did a 3-month stint at the World Resources Institute, which is really the full extent of my environmental training. So I learned all of this on the job, and the most surprising thing to me, I think, is when I'm in a room full of people, whether it's at DWP or one of the other city agencies, and they're all twice as old as me and have been working in their careers since I was 3 years old. And everyone looks to me, well, Alex, what should we do? And why are you asking me? But when you work for an elected official, whether it's a council member or the mayor, you're acting on their behalf. And so what I think has been surprising to me is how much responsibility you're able to get at a pretty young age, and relatively inexperienced. You're put in a position to make big decisions and provide guidance to people who have been doing this for their whole career. So that's been really interesting for me.
Alex, I want to point out that you sent me the mayor's clean tech hot sheet while you were speaking. I got the email while you were
That's
speaking.
how good I am.
Damon.
Hi, my name is Damon. I'm not a UCLA alum, but I don't really like SC too much, so I think we all have something in common. Don't tell my family I said that. Anyways, yeah, I'm from Orange County though, so I'm a local. And went up to Berkeley for undergrad, environmental sciences. Took off a couple years, went to law school in Hastings, and sort of fell into the on-campus interviewing, I want to get a firm job thing, and ended up at a law firm, Bingham McCutcheon in Los Angeles for 5 years doing environmental work. And you know, for any of you considering law school and practicing, just be aware of what you're getting into if you decide to go into private practice. A lot of good things. I got fantastic training. I had great mentors and was able to pay off my loans and all that stuff. It actually does give you a good foundation for things you want to do later in life. But there's a trade-off. Just remember that. And the number of hours and the pressures of billing and all that stuff, that could be a panel all on itself. But I left private practice after 5 years, took off some time to travel, and then took off another year, and then the position at NRDC came up, and I think I owe it all to Kara Horowitz, who's here in the audience. We've known each other a long time, and what I'm doing now is I work for NRDC. We're a national environmental organization. We have a Southern California office in Santa Monica with a staff of about 30, about 11 or 12 attorneys. And I'm a staff attorney in the Ecosystems Project for Southern California. We work on land use sustainability and open space preservation around Southern California. So anywhere where there's a project that we don't like that is going to spew out emissions that are going to harm people or eradicate open space or wildlife habitat that's important to the region, we try to step in and either block it or make the project better. And I can't think of a more rewarding thing that I could be doing with my time or my professional career. And I've never been able to say it before, but I really do love my job. Surprise! I never thought I'd be able to say I love my job. So for all of you out there, you know, this turnout is fantastic. Just the fact that so many of you are concerned about environmental issues. I think there's a place in every sector for people who care about the environment, whether it's the nonprofit sector, government, or even private practice. There are ways, even on the private side, to, if you work in compliance, to try to help your clients, you know, work within the law to achieve your objectives, but also be on the straight and narrow in terms of what you need to do in terms of following environmental laws and regulations. And I think, you know, the more we start talking about what other opportunities are out there, how can we put your passions to good use in improving sustainability in Southern California, in the state, across the nation, and internationally, then I think this will all be this will be a better place for everyone.
You want to briefly describe your career trajectory and what you found most surprising about your current job?
Sure. We had a few people that braved the traffic coming from City Hall here, but
yeah, so, you were the last one.
Yeah, I know. I got out of a really late meeting. It ran over like 45 minutes.
Tired, so it's partly my
You
fault.
saved the earth in one meeting. So.
I grew up in Los Angeles, like about 2 miles east of here. So while I didn't go to UCLA like some other people here, I definitely grew up in the neighborhood and appreciate everything that UCLA does. I went to the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. That's sort of how I got politically involved. When I got politically involved, I didn't know that my interest was really sustainability and energy and environment. I kind of fell into that after I graduated. While I was at GW, I tried to intern as many places as possible. One of the internships that I got was with Henry Waxman, who's a local congressman, and that was just through pure annoyance. I just annoyed them and annoyed them. I showed up, I sent, you know, resumes, and finally they were like, fine, just leave us alone, and here's an internship and whatever. And that actually kind of led to everything else, because when I graduated from college, I started looking for a job, and one of the jobs I applied for was a job with Congressman Tom Lantos, who at the time was the ranking minority of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He was a congressman from Northern California, San Francisco and South San Francisco. And he saw Henry Waxman on my resume and a few other things that I did. And he called you know, or he didn't, but staffers called and checked up and whatever. And so really the internship, and one of the things that people are talking about, the lessons is, you know, your connection, it'll get your foot in the door, it'll get you that interview, it'll sort of get people to pay attention, and then it's up to you to really kind of do the hard work and prove that you deserve the job. So I got a job as kind of a really answering phones and things like that for Congressman Lantos, and about 2 months into the job, his body man, who's his traveling aide, left to go to law school. And they were like, you're young, you don't have any responsibilities or anything, you can have no life and travel whatever and do whatever, you know, they need you to do. You do it. So I did it, and it was an amazing experience. I got to follow, you know, one of the most respected members of Congress all around the world, and to all his meetings in DC and everything like that. And when the congressman became the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, we started to staff up, and he was getting a little bit older and slowing down and wasn't traveling as much, so I sort of took the initiative and said, I have some more time now and would like to really delve into things. And so they assigned me some work, and a lot of the work was energy policy. It was right when sort of everyone was talking about sustainability and the war in Iraq, and how kind of energy policy affected our national security and our interactions with foreign governments. So I did a lot of research on that. They sent me, I got to go to Norway and other places to do research. So I did that, and that's kind of what got me really involved in the field and really interested, because it's fascinating, you know, the things that we, you know, the cars that we drive and the plastic bags that we use and how that affects our national security and everything like that. And the congressman ultimately died, and I lost my job, and you know, it was very sad. And so when I sort of started to look for other jobs, I started to do some consulting in the sustainability field for some contacts that I had met there. And kind of one thing led to the other, and I had met some of Council President Garcetti's staff when they came to DC and met with us, and I was sort of thinking about moving back home, and I asked one of the staffers there, you know, if you hear of anything in the city, I'm looking for jobs in you know, the sustainability field and the public policy field, and she said, well, we actually have an opening because another person went to law school, and why don't you come work for us? And that's where I ended up where I am, and I handle energy and environmental policy for the council president. Biggest surprise? I think the biggest surprise was really how quickly things move in the city. You know, for as much as you think things stand still and no one really does anything compared to Congress, when you move here, things just are moving. You know, in a month, an ordinance can go through, you know, from inception to sort of a law, you know, on the books. It can be a few weeks, so it's pretty amazing how quickly things move in the city.
All right, thanks, Guy. So at the Luskin Center, we're organized around research initiatives, and we're always looking for the next important environment, sustainability, energy issue on the horizon. So I wanted to take this opportunity, both for the center's interest and for your own edification, to ask each of you to identify what you think are the two most important, let's say, environmental sustainability issues Los Angeles or Southern California faces, and why. And you know, hopefully we'll get a little debate going here. So, Guy, you get to go. You get to go first.
It, 2 in a row. It's like a fantasy draft. You go there and back. So
I get that. I think that there's the immediate, which is the fact that the city's Department of Water and Power has the largest mix of dirty coal use of any municipal utility. So that's sort of a direct thing. But I think of the bigger picture and really the shift of where the city has been and where it's going is our culture, the way the city was designed. And you know, in the 1920s and 30s, Los Angeles had an amazing public transit infrastructure. They had, you know, streetcars, and they had subways, and kind of in the 40s and 50s, there was a strategic and concerted effort by the city and city planners to make Los Angeles a car city. You know, people moved from downtown and around downtown to the west side. The city really spread out, and it was about freeways and cars, and really everyone having a car and everyone driving in a car. And that doesn't really work today, and you know, the city's so big, and it's so congested, and it's kind of funny. It was designed so that people can move from the East Coast and really, have big open spaces and, spread their arms out and fresh air, and ultimately it led to where we are now, which is the opposite of that, which is congestion and dirty air, and so I think really the biggest issue facing Los Angeles environmentally is the way the city is designed, and moving forward in a new design of the city that focuses on public transit and focuses on city centers and walking and biking, and so I think that it's a culture shift of the design of the city.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Guy. Well, I think this is going to be. I think you'll see some themes here, and I think.
I'm glad I went first.
Yes, I think this is a car. This is a car culture, and we have a transportation infrastructure that is aging, that is antiquated, that is out of date, that doesn't connect people to their communities, and we have a real issue here in LA. And I would say if I had to pick one thing, when I thought about this at home when I got the email from Colleen, but by the way, Colleen should be up here too. She's amazing. And, she's, yeah, really, she put this together, Colleen. With the Los Angeles Sustainability Collaborative, which I didn't mention in my previous introduction, where a lot of what we do is think through some of these complex issues, because what we try and do is help fund grad students and undergrads to do research on these issues. So do check out our website if you're a grad student or undergrad at lasustainability.org, and we're open to hearing your ideas, and this will be informational for me as well. But I think we have two issues, and this is what I was saying. I thought about this before. One, there's the problems that face us here at home that impact our ability as a region to survive, and I think there's the issues that impact globally, the issues that we can be leaders on and guide the rest of the country and the world on. And I think at home, if I had to pick one, I would say I think water policy is one of our biggest problems. I think we have a serious, serious problem with our current water infrastructure. It's so old, it's so inefficient, you have no idea. Pumping water over the Trajectories is the single most energy intensive use in the state. It uses them. It's the single point most energy intensive use in the state. So there's energy implications, there's access to water implications, and then you go all the way up to the delta, and then there's land and runoff and land subsidence. Sorry, I'm on the spot here. But I think what Guy was saying in terms of how we can be representative for the world, how we can lead the world in environmental issues, I think it's transportation, and I think I'm not going to go too much more into it because I think Guy gave a great introduction on it. But I think where we need to go is, we need to build those walkable communities. We need to think about bicycles in the most beautiful city in the world, in my opinion. We need to think about how we can bike around and get people out of their cars to enjoy the city. And so I think transportation is big. And then there's all the air qualities and energy impacts involved. So I'll pass it on to that now. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, first I just want to say there is a surprise. The fact that I'm working for a business organization that's considered
there you go.
slightly at some point an environmental organization. But hey. Anyway, it's a great nexus to be a part of. So when Colleen sent the email and I was like, 2? Really, could choose 2? There's so many. I was a geek and I made a list. So I'll read from a little bit from that list. But of course, transportation is our number one problem. That adds our number 2 problem, which is terrible air quality. Number 3 problem, probably also number 1, is water issues.
You're expanding the mandate here.
Yeah, I am. But yeah, I know. So let's talk about solutions because those are the problems. With air quality, California is obviously leading the way with SB 375, AB 32, which is currently in jeopardy. LABC was one of the first Southland business organizations that come out against the ballot initiative, proudly, because we think that it would turn back time. It also would completely diminish the burgeoning clean tech sector here and throughout the state. So those are 2 very important pieces of legislation that should be carried forward, and I think all of us here are supportive of their implementation. obviously the 3010 plan, which Alex's boss has called for. He's actually, I think he's back in DC right now, but has been going back and forth to DC. It's an acceleration, and I won't say much because I'm pretty sure you'll talk about it a little bit, but it's an acceleration of the long-term transportation plan, which is it's a metro measure. It's $40 billion, and it would create a transit system, although a shell of a transit system, a good one, train from downtown to the west side, and connectors at the airport. And he is advocating for an acceleration of that plan from 30 years to 10, which would be nice. We can use it in our lifetime. Yeah, I mean, it's important. It also creates jobs. That's a big thing for us. Another thing is high-speed rail. We advocated for that here in Sacramento, and it's important because we also work in housing issues. And what we realize is that all of the housing is away from the job centers. So that's what's causing all of your congestion. So if we can find some sort of, if you can enhance MetroLink, if you can create a high-speed rail, Anaheim to LA, LA up to Bakersfield, I mean, you're seeing a lot of people that can live on the outskirts that can get into town in 20 minutes or less. And it wouldn't obviously clog the roads. We can spend money on cars, rail cars, instead of expanding our freeways. So. And then I just want to talk a little bit, if I can, a little bit about the project I'm doing with JR. Okay, well, should I come back? Okay, we're working on a feed-in tariff policy with the Luskin Center right now, and that's it's an exciting initiative that engages the public sector in allowing private sector to generate electricity and sell it back to the utility for a set tariff. What this allows businesses to do essentially is play a role in achieving our renewable portfolio goals, which are ambitious, but I don't think are unrealistic. And it also helps us create jobs here and create a clean tech industry here. So we're in the process, we just finished all of the report, and we're in the process of implementation and lobbying the hell out of Guy and Alex and Emily about this program, but they do support it. We have decent interest. So with that, I pass it on to Emily.
So absolutely transportation, and I would say one of the things to note is the ribbon of highways that we received in California was due in large part to federal funding and JobWorks programs. And so while we look at how we're going to get out of this terrible economy that we're in, and as Alex and his boss and our bosses work on good green job solutions, it's kind of the first time that we've come out of an economic slump with a green eye, which is really exciting. You know, before it was just like jobs, 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 we need to get people paid, whether it's nasty environmentally or whatever, we need to move forward. And I think maybe for the first time you have a consensus of leadership in the city of LA, or certainly, hopefully in California, saying, yes, we need to ride this economic incline, but we also need to do it clean and we need to do it thoughtfully. So I think that's really exciting. And a piece of the green kind of transportation that our office is really focused on and that my boss is obsessed with, in a good way, is looking at how we surface, whether that's our roofs, whether that's our streets, and I think it's kind of this nerdy niche that we don't necessarily talk about when we talk about transportation policy, but it's so important. You know, LA, somebody talked about water. We already don't have the water resources that we need to sustain this incredibly fantastic city with all the people who are here that we want to keep here, and all the restaurants and all the fun and all the good. It's going to be very thirsty and very expensive to drink here, to water here, to live here, to build business here. And how do we sustain our own water supply so that we don't need to use incredible amounts of energy to bring water from further away places? And that's in large part permeables. And it's not something that we're talking about enough. It's expensive, and for the fantastic people who work for the city and give their hearts and their souls and have been there forever, it's not something that is that interesting to them right now. And the hope is that really annoying people like me and my boss and Guy and Alex. Okay. I said it in a really endearing way where I said that I was annoying first, so I thought you guys would be happy. But you know, that we talk about when we deal with our transportation issue in Los Angeles, which really is the biggest environmental problem, we do it environmentally. And I don't know that that's something that we have totally mastered yet. So I'm putting my check mark next to permeable pavements and cool roofs.
Well, in the interest of introducing some controversy here, as the mayors want to do from time to time. I'm going to suggest that transportation is not the biggest environmental issue, and that it's not really an environmental issue, it's really more of a quality of life issue. I think the reason why people are concerned about transportation and traffic and all that is because they don't like wasting time moving around the city, not because they care so much about what's coming out of their tailpipes. Certainly, that's an ancillary effect of congestion and wasted fuel and national security issues from importing fuel. But I think that the main public push and political force behind addressing transportation issues is really a quality of life and convenience issue. So with that out there, I think, I don't know if I can say the most important, but I think an interesting environmental issue that I knew nothing about before I started at the city is stormwater pollution and urban runoff. And this is the the process by which water falls on impermeable surfaces and washes dog poop and fertilizer and brake pad dust and agricultural runoff into the ocean. And what we found as the city gets more and more urban and we pave more areas and build bigger buildings, whenever it rains, we're taking all that rainwater and just sending it straight to the ocean. And it picks up a lot of pollution along the way. Now that's also a wasted resource because we're in a drought and we're in a desert, and so we're letting millions and billions of gallons of water go to waste just by dumping it in the ocean, and then it gets salty, and then we have to build another massive plant to take the salt out of it. So it just seems like kind of a no-brainer that if we capture water that's clean, that comes from the sky, before it gets dirty, before it pollutes the ocean, before it damages coastal ecosystems and puts our tourism infrastructure and beaches at risk, why don't we capture that, use it as a positive resource, and have another way to get water instead of pumping it over the mountains and everything. So
you're on my team.
To add controversy, I will say one of the largest causes of urban runoff and water pollution is transportation.
Certainly.
So Alex, not to peg you, but you're going to be a single issue guy here? Is there a second?
A second one. I think that the second issue is kind of not a particular issue, but a larger social issue of how do you get people to care and really care about the environment and not care just because it's cool. What I've seen that's really disheartening for me, I consider myself a greenie, not because I'm like a tree hugger, because I love fish. I mean, I think sea otters are really cute. And, like, when they're covered in oil, they're not nearly as cute. But I'm of the school that the environment has an intrinsic value aside from whatever value it has for people who extract things from it or live in it, or whatever value it has for those particular animals. It's just it has existed before we were here, and so intrinsically we ought to protect it. Most people don't share that view. Most people are environmentalists are green because it's cooler, because it's convenient, or because it's cheap. And I think that's something that's difficult because we see, in my position, this boils down to what happens when you have to pay for environmental progress. And when we come up to issues where we have a plan to reduce the carbon intensity of Los Angeles' power mix by accelerating the shutdown of coal-fired power plants and expanding in-basin solar and these kind of things. But people aren't willing to pay another $2 a month for this. And for me, I would gladly do it. Something you may not know about, DWP offers a program called Voluntary Green Power. You can just check a box on your bill or online, and you can choose to get 100% of your power from wind. You pay 3 cents more per kilowatt for it. I do it. I think most people in this room would gladly pay 3 cents more to have a clear conscience.
What does that translate to on your bill?
I don't know, an extra $5 a month maybe. Yeah, it's nothing. But I think what's frustrating for me is when we run into these issues, whether it's on power or on water, there is a more sustainable solution. It just costs a little bit more, and a lot of average Joes aren't willing to pay that extra cost. And so how we overcome that, I think we educate people so they understand what are the external impacts of all this, that it really is in their own best interest to pay a little more now instead of paying a lot more later. Yeah, but that's the thing that I think is the most challenging.
Also finding the silver lining with that too. Because sometimes you pay more and you're going to get more.
Yeah, and one way we tried to spin that, and I don't mean spin in a bad way, is that there is this other benefit of doing good environmental things, and sometimes that's creating new jobs and new job opportunities for people. So if you invest in solar panels, you're not just getting clean energy, but you're putting people to work building solar panels, installing solar panels, maintaining solar panels. So in this economy, and in my position, that's kind of the bulk of what I do, is pitch the environmental issues as economic issues. and that by being green we can use green growth to recover, build our way out of the recession. So I think that's one of those silver lining issues where you can get people to care a little bit more. Sometimes I feel a little guilty though, because I'm peddling environmental causes under this cloak of economics, and so pure purists. I think
Don't feel guilty about that.
Yeah. No, but I think there are a lot of purists that would see that as a wolf in sheep's clothing. So.
Awesome. These are all great comments, and I couldn't agree more. I think transportation is obviously a huge issue for Southern California. Just from a health perspective, regionally, things are better. We were just talking before about how there used to be smog alerts and very visible evidence of the pollution that's out there caused by the particular geography of Southern California, the Southern California basin, but also the huge amount of pollution coming out of the ports and the cars and trucks and everything like that. But on a more localized level, there are neighborhoods in and around Southern California who bear the brunt of pollution much more than others, and that's something that we're really trying to take a much closer look at. And environmental justice, I think, is inextricably tied to transportation. If you live within 300 meters of a freeway, you are very much more likely to develop respiratory illnesses and other health problems than in other places. If you live in Wilmington, near the ports, or in some of these other communities that are right along highways and other goods movement corridors, you have a much greater chance of dying or succumbing to some sort of illness from the pollution. This is not acceptable. Is this what we are allowing in our society here? Is this what we want? I think transportation, we're not going to solve it overnight, but with all the suggestions that we're hearing today, and things like the mayor's 3010 initiative, I mean, this is something that everyone's getting behind. I went to that rally that the mayor and Congresswoman Jane Harmon had. It was last week. I can't keep track anymore. I think it was last week. But you had the mayor, you had elected officials, you had labor representatives, and the environmental community that I was representing, all coming together in recognition that there are things that we can do together collaboratively that would be a win-win situation for reducing pollution, getting people back to work, and increasing mobility throughout the region. So it just takes a little bit of thinking outside the box. And so the second point I would say is a big issue for Southern California is political resistance. And I think that's something that Alex touched on. How do we get people to care? How do we get our elected officials to care? And I think that is incumbent on all of you to tell your friends and get involved. Most people think that this 3010 initiative is a good plan, and Measure R that's going to put 70% of this half-cent sales tax increase toward public transit projects. All of that is good stuff, but there are elected officials and people out there who, if they don't think they're getting their fair share for their highway project or their piece of pork, they're going to try to game the system and get what they want. We don't want more politics as usual messing up these good ideas that we're coming up with. So get out there, be active, make sure your representatives know what you think. If there's a good idea, fight for it.
Thanks, Damon. All right, before we have a really wonderful reception waiting for all of you all. I'm going to allow just a few questions, but before I do that, I want to recognize the people that made this possible. Teresa Laura, Michelle Pervez, and Colleen Callahan. Let's give them a hand. So we'll just take just a couple of questions. If you could please...
People that have never thought about the environment in a meaningful way to do it. Does anyone have any opinion?
And I represent the constituency that by far is the most reluctant to accept this type of reality.
And the LA Business Council, the organization that I work with, has done a very successful job of creating these coalitions with the environmental leaders, labor, elected officials. But with us, we've designed it's a very tricky scheme. What we do is we say to them, you install fluorescent light bulbs and you'll save money. Wow. And they're like, really? And they don't know that it's actually saving the environment. So that's pretty much the way that we have schemed our way into that, and it's working very effectively, in fact. So.
Yeah, and for anyone the wrong idea with my purist screed earlier, this is a very practical world, and especially in politics, it's all about, it's about getting things done. It's the art of the possible. Yeah. So I think the way to do it is not necessarily by trying to change people's minds, but by building coalitions that can pull the right people together. And one thing I didn't appreciate when I was in your position is that there are a lot of different breeds of environmentalists, and often they are as opposed to each other as they are to big oil companies. So, for example, as we look at the development of renewable energy in the Mojave Desert, you're pitting clean energy and climate advocates against open space and habitat advocates, and they're bitterly fighting against each other. And that conflict may very well sink the whole project. So, how do we find projects and policies that can bring enough of the environmentalists on board so that we can present a united front from that perspective, let alone building a broader coalition like Michelle mentioned, where you have business groups, labor groups. I mean, getting those two to play nice to each other, that's quite an accomplishment. So I think that's really the key.
So you first start at home with people that are already with a cause, get them together.
Yeah, I think that's key. And the challenge, I think, is for those environmental causes that don't really have that constituency, where it's hard to make a business case for somebody to, protect a coastal, coral reef or something like that. In a third world country, they may not understand the downside to their economy long term of degrading a coastal coral reef, something like that. And so, it's easy to pitch someone on a fluorescent light bulb and solar panels. These things are, there's a business that'll make money, someone will get a job, and benefits here. But I think as you guys are looking at what's kind of the next big issue, it'll be things where no one has really figured out how to pitch it to a broader group, and there's still, people chained to trees because they're the only ones who care. So how do we make that relevant to a broader group of stakeholders?
Can I jump in really quick? I think this brings up a fundamental issue that we have in the city of LA, and I think all over the world when you talk about environmental issues as a whole, and I think it comes down to communication. And if we're going to talk about career development and one of the reasons why I think I've been successful and one of the reasons why I think you're going to be successful is you need to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. And the more you can do that, the better off you're going to be in everything in business and life. Because the more we can get our environmental message, I have a different appreciation for the environment than the next person over, but the more I can see the world through their eyes, the better I can explain to them why it's in their benefit too, to act or to change their behavior.
Discussing things much more from a policy standpoint. I was hoping you might be able to speak on behalf of the interaction between policy and business and what your personal experience has been, if any, in working with businesses in Southern California, especially any corporations that are based down here.
Okay. I think we all can actually talk to this, just because you guys interface with business every single day. Alex is.
I had a really interesting meeting last week with the Valero oil company. And you guys may know they're the largest ones bankrolling the effort to repeal AB 32. And this was interesting because I was at the Department of Water and Power, and Valero has a refinery in Wilmington. And as we raise power rates to keep up with rising labor costs and our move towards a cleaner power mix, it makes their refinery business a lot harder to pencil out. And it was one of those issues where you're fundamentally looking at someone and saying, in the future, this may not be a viable business here. I mean, this is a very energy-intensive business, and as we raise power rates, there's going to be winners and losers, and you might be one of the losers. On the other side, I get to work with a lot of companies that are usually smaller and more entrepreneurial that are innovating with new technologies. They've got a new design for a solar module, or they've got a fluorescent light bulb fixture that's made with LEDs, so it uses half as much energy as a fluorescent bulb. And those kind of companies, those are going to be the winners. And so it's interesting for me to kind of be in this position where you can see this economy transitioning, and there's going to be certain companies that are going to be on the losing end unless they change their business model. And you can see oil companies ought to be thinking of themselves as energy companies. You can find energy from a lot of different sources. And one thing that I almost wanted to jump across the table and slap this Valero guy, he was saying, well, we've made investments in alternative fuel sources and renewables, and they just don't pencil out. And it struck me as odd because the reason they don't pencil out is because we don't have an economy that fully accounts for the costs of these types of fuel sources. And as long as there's oil companies fighting against carbon regulation, we never will. So, I mean, the intrinsic conflict in what he said just kind of really struck me. So there's both companies that are fighting tooth and nail to hold on to the status quo because that's what's profitable for them. And there's a lot of other companies that will come whenever we call to say, we need your support to show there will be new jobs and new industries created by these innovative environmental policies. And they're there as well. So I think it's this balance of when do these new clean energy companies start to have a louder voice than the big oil companies. So.
That's definitely what I think we're finding too. The 5 years that I've been in the LEDC, we've watched, for instance, Chevron, I'll just say it. Before, you know, we have a sustainability summit every year. And we obviously fundraise for these large summits, and, you know, it started going from, you know, your small organizations, or like the interior design companies that have been on board with sustainability since day one, and those types of folks. And now we're getting the BPs and the Chevrons because they are changing their business model, because they have to. They have no other choice. That's just the way it is, especially British Petroleum. But we just had a summit in...
Picture that sea otter coming.
No, I know. I actually didn't think about that. But, you know, well, I'm not going to... But we just had a summit recently, and our summits focus on clean energy, clean tech, everything under the sun, incentives, policy initiatives. And we just had a gentleman there from Saatchi & Saatchi, which is a global advertising. And he was brought on, he was the youngest director of the Sierra Club at 25. His name is Adam Morbach. And he was brought on to be the global director for sustainability for all of Saatchi & Saatchi. And he's brought on to take a company like Walmart and make them more energy efficient, make them more sustainable, and turn their brand into a brand of sustainability. When you are Walmart and you start ordering fresh produce and organic produce, it changes the entire marketplace. And, you know, I used to not think that, but now, you know, in this day and age, you really have to think about that kind of stuff. Thomas Freedman did a New York Times editorial about 2 months ago, which he said the largest companies are going to be creating the most change.
I was going to talk about, so I sat at a round table with Motorola and Verizon last week about their sustainability practices. And it was fascinating to hear the heads of these companies talk about how they are choosing to enter the world of sustainability, not even because it is driven by the people that buy their products or subscribe to their products or use their products, because they are realizing, they're doing it because they are realizing that it's just the best business practice, and they are aligning themselves to be, you know, ahead of the curve. You know, one of the people mentioned that there is that sort of niche group of greenies who are going to sort of consume any product that is green, and that's fine, but that's not going to sustain a business. And then there are the people that are just not going to do anything at all. But really, you know, the business itself is what is the key driving factor, and it's actually making them money. And while other people are sort of not sure or don't know whether they should go about it, they're really moving forward, you know, with hybrid trucks, because that saves them money. They're moving forward with practices that don't even cost them anything, like forcing their drivers to turn off their trucks when they're waiting as opposed to idling. You know, saving millions and millions of dollars in fuel, and it's these small things. And I think that finding that nexus between the things that can be done very easily and showing that it's more profitable is really that stepping stone to the big shift, which is when these companies will realize that you know, they might have to invest some capital cost up front for the long-term benefits.
I can actually attest to that. With Verizon, I have a friend who works for a construction company who is, from what I understand, Verizon is making all of its stores LEED silver from now on. And when we see things like that from companies making an honest effort to green their practices, I think it's fantastic. And you know, stories that we've heard today are promising. I just want to add a word of caution that you know, we all need to look at these initiatives and projects with a jaundiced eye and really look at what the company as a whole is doing. You know, if Valero has a head of sustainable practices and is giving money to, you know, Greenpeace or NRDC or whatever, I don't think we would take their money. But then on, you know, on the other hand, they're sponsoring an initiative from out of state to interfere in California's voting process to roll back one of the most progressive and groundbreaking landmark global warming laws, AB 32. What does that tell us? Greenwashing is one of the biggest threats to a thriving, sustainable business model. And it's up to you, it's up to all of us to make sure we don't get snowed by companies that are talking the talk but not walking the walk. That's all I wanted to add.
So, in Council District 5, Guy said not everyone consumes any product that's green. We do. We love it. And I think we're lucky to have constituents that are really excited to maybe spend a little bit extra to get a little bit more in terms of their sustainability that their dollars buy. And we don't have an industrial district. We have a district with a lot of commercial space and a lot of housing. And when you go eat on 3rd Street or Robertson or La Cienega, what you're starting to see are people who are really focusing on sustainable eating, are really focusing on lowering their carbon footprint in the hotels that you can stay on, whether it's Beverly Boulevard or Melrose. And I think it really speaks to how we as consumers and how we as people who are, getting older and going to be more in places of higher professional echelons, how you can start making those changes. Because I can guarantee you, if you walk down Beverly Boulevard even 5 years ago, you wouldn't see little wind, solar, energy, power signs on the front of the window of, the Soleil Hotel or whatever it is, that people want to spend their money there because they feel better about it. And I think if CD5 can offer anything, it's sort of a, this could be how all of LA is, I think, because people want to feel good about the money that they're spending, about the cars that they drive, about where they eat their food. Napa, I don't know if you guys know this, Napa Valley Grill started this cool program where you can get CSA food delivered to Napa Valley Grill, and you can take home your local groceries and eat more sustainably just by walking by that restaurant in Westwood. And looking at our friends in the business community on the West Side and in Mid-City, I think there's a lot of inspiration, and hopefully we don't see business and government working against each other on environmental issues, but working together. So.
All right. Well, I want to first say we have a reception outside for all of you, appetizers and drinks. I want to thank each of you for coming out tonight. I especially want to thank our panelists. These are extremely busy people and very committed, very smart. We really appreciate you guys coming and sharing your own stories with us and what you think are the most important things that LA needs to tackle as we move forward. So thank you all very much.